finally done. I never realized funerals could be this exhausting. It's our son's funeral, for heaven's sake. Why would you say that? I'm just stating the facts. We're not the only ones here, you know. Surely, I must be included in that. In the first place, it's partly her fault that boy died. Catherine, my mother-in-law, never looked kindly upon me since we got married. But blaming me even for David's death. Shouldn't we be grieving for David and reminiscing about him? The complaints towards me never cease. Edward, my father-in-law, tries to mediate, but Catherine remains unmoved. If only you hadn't married her. My boy wouldn't have taken his own life. He should have been holding his child by now. I clenched my fists as tightly as I could. Frustration and anger welled up inside me. Catherine had treated me with disdain until we left the funeral home. When I got home, I was so tired that I fell asleep. As if I forgot everything. And then the next morning. Can you get the newspaper quickly? Yes. Hurry up. I wished it was just a dream. As I was told, I went to check the mailbox. I found an envelope tucked in with the newspaper. An envelope? Who could it be from? I took it out and checked the sender, but there was no name. There was just one sentence. Make sure Mom doesn't notice. With that, I understood who it was for and who it was from. I hid the envelope in my pocket and went back inside. What were you doing? You're useless. She snatched the newspaper from my hand. I sneaked back to the bedroom and opened the envelope. Inside, written in familiar handwriting, was something shocking. When I finished reading it, I felt like I was going to explode with anger and fear. I struggled to control my trembling body and took a deep breath. Just you wait and see. I immediately began to take action. My name is Lavinia, and I am just an ordinary housewife. I met my husband David in college, and we quickly became close. Since we first met, David had a strong desire to leave his parents' house as soon as possible. You don't have to rush so much, you know? No, I can't stand being dependent on my parents any longer. But we're still students. That's why. We have so much time now, I want to do everything I can. On the other hand, I was fully prepared to rely on my parents while I was in college. Being in the same department and major, it was natural for us to start dating. When we were juniors, David finally put his plan into action. It's going to get busy from now on. Can you help me? Of course. What do you need me to do? Thanks. First, let's. David's plan was to start a company while still in school. He had told me his reasons before, but another reason was that he was set to join his father-in-law's company after graduation. He wanted to make his own future decisions. A month later, we successfully established the company. It's just the beginning, but we've finally taken the first step. Thanks. What are you talking about? It's too early for thanks. The hard part is yet to come. True. I'll be counting on you. Leave it to me. David, a few others, and I created a startup. The company aimed to run a media platform that provided various types of information. From entertainment like games and comics to life hacks, we covered a wide range of media. But David was particularly focused on a website that provided information about adoption. By the way, I've always wanted to ask, why did you start the adoption site? My friend from high school was adopted. As I heard more about it, I became interested. Usually, the focus is on those who adopt, but the adoptees have their own thoughts too, right? Now that you mention it, that's true. So, I wanted to help. David continued to run the site almost single-handedly. The company continued to do well, thanks to the wealth of information, accuracy, and above all, the humor David valued. It even got small mentions in magazines. But one day, just before graduation, "You don't seem very cheerful today." "Yeah, actually, I told my parents about the company yesterday, and they got really angry." "Why?" "I guess they wanted me to get a proper job. Especially Mom, she was really upset." After that, David often had a gloomy look on his face. Sometimes, he couldn't sleep until morning and had to get sleeping pills from the doctor. Seeing David like this, I decided I would support him for the rest of my life. The day before graduation, David somehow managed to persuade his parents, and I saw a genuine smile on his face for the first time in a long while. "Finally, I'm free. Now you can live just for yourself." "About that, would you move in with me?" "Yes, of course." We started living together, and both our work and private lives were fulfilling. That lifestyle continued for about 4 years, and then it was my birthday. "Happy birthday!" "Thank you. It doesn't matter how many times you say it, it always makes me happy." "Hearing that makes me happy too. So..." David's face turned unusually serious as he pulled a small box from his pocket and placed it on the table. "What's this?" "I want you to marry me." When David opened the box, there was a small, sparkling ring inside. Of course, I had made up my mind long before. "The pleasure is all mine." He took my hand and slipped the ring on my finger. It fit perfectly. But there was one thing that caught my attention. "Why is the box a little crooked?" "Oh, I was trying to decide when to give it to you. I've been holding it in my pocket and it ended up like this." He must have been that nervous. Hearing that made me love David even more. The only problem was introducing him to my parents. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." "No, actually, I'm nervous." "I'm with you." "Yeah." We introduced David to my parents first, and they accepted him without any issues. And today, we were going to meet his parents. Since leaving the house, David had been a bit unsettled. "What are you doing back here?" "This is my home, isn't it?" "Fine, come in quickly." Seeing their interaction, I started to worry if everything would be all right. When we were shown into the living room, Edward and an unfamiliar girl were sitting on the sofa. "Welcome back, David. Have a seat." Catherine served coffee, but there wasn't any for me. Maybe I wasn't welcome. "To get straight to the point, I want to marry Lavinia." "I see. You're at that age now." "Marriage? I won't allow it." "Why not? Marrying a woman you don't know." "Calm down." "But..." David has made his decision. It's not for us to interfere." Finally, with Edward's persuasion, we were allowed to marry. Then, the girl sitting next to Edward spoke up. "Congratulations on your marriage, bro." "Thanks, Wilhelmina." "Lavinia, nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you too." We believed we were going to lead a happy life together. However, it didn't last long. It was on the way home after the greetings. "So, you have a sister?" "Yeah." "But you don't look much alike." "I'm an only child, so I don't really understand." "We don't look alike, huh?" "You don't?" "Sorry, it's nothing. Let's just get home quickly." "Yeah." I thought David looked a bit surprised in this moment. Later, our marriage certificate was accepted, and we became officially married. We were overjoyed, but our honeymoon phase ended after just 1 week. "Catherine, what are you doing here?" "I have something important to discuss." "I'm coming in." "Wait a minute." Catherine barged in without waiting for an answer. She threw open the living room door with force. "Why are you here?" Isn't that a bit rude? So, what's the matter? Well, after you visited, Dad's health took a turn for the worse. Dad? Yes. Catherine said Edward had been having health issues for a while. Judging by David's expression, he hadn't known about this. Then Catherine dropped a bombshell. He was diagnosed with cancer. What? Dad wants to recuperate at home, but it's just me and Wilhelmina at the house. So you want us to move in? Yes, exactly. The creepy smile on Catherine's face gave me chills. It was clear David was torn. Even in college, he had a strong desire to leave home as soon as possible. But with Edward in this condition, it was understandable that he was conflicted. As David hesitated, she turned to me. What do you think? Me? I never expected her to ask me. I wasn't prepared at all. Well, Don't tell me you're going to abandon us? Of course not. Then what? A normal person would answer immediately. As Catherine berated me, David came to my defense. Don't blame Lavinia. We'll move in. Good. I'll let Dad know. See you. Catherine left, looking satisfied. Once she was gone, David held his head in his hands. I'm sorry. This is all my fault. Don't apologize. It's not your fault, David. Just when things were looking up. Why does something always get in my way? What do you mean? Whenever things are about to go well, something happens. I'm here with you. Okay? Yeah, you're right. We quickly terminated the lease on the apartment we had rented for our newlywed life and prepared to move in with his family. From Catherine's attitude towards me, it was clear that the future would not be bright. And so, our cohabitation began. Thank you for coming. I'm looking forward to living here. First, I need you to do something, Lavinia. What is it? My back has been hurting lately. Could you clean the house? We hadn't even unpacked yet. Hurry up. Don't just stand there. From then on, I was at her beck and call. David helped too, but Catherine didn't seem to care at all. After a week of living together, I noticed something. This family revolved around Wilhelmina. Even though David was their blood relative, he often felt like an outsider. Edward and Wilhelmina both seemed somewhat weary of Catherine's antics. Have you figured out this household? Yeah, I think I have. That's why I didn't want to come back here. So, what does Wilhelmina think about all this? I don't know. We've lived as siblings, but I honestly can't tell what she's thinking. Really? Wilhelmina was always kind and friendly to me. As David said, it seemed like Wilhelmina was harboring some dark feelings. Meanwhile, I was tasked with taking care of Edward. And what was Catherine doing? Absolutely nothing. Edward is calling for you. Go to him quickly. Yes. I took a deep breath before entering the room. What do you need? I need a little help with something. As I approached Edward, he reached out and grabbed my butt. What are you doing? Don't be so upset. This is just family bonding. Absolutely not. Catherine had said Edward was weakened by cancer treatment. But he didn't seem weak at all. He grabbed my arm with surprising strength and tried to push me down. Stop it. Are you sure? If David finds out about this, it'll be a disaster. With that one sentence, I hesitated for a moment. Edward took advantage of my hesitation and tried to undress me. Realizing the danger, I pushed him away with all my strength. Just then, Catherine walked in. What are you doing? Edward tried to push me down. Catherine, you know I wouldn't do such a thing. Please believe me. I had asked the wrong person for help. How could you go after your father-in-law when you have a husband? What kind of woman are you? No, I didn't. If you don't want David to find out, you'd better do as we say. It was a trade-off. Even though it was Edward's fault, I didn't want David to know about this. All right. It wasn't until much later that I realized this was their plan all along. Edward didn't touch me directly after that, but the fear that he might was always there. I couldn't concentrate at work, and I started making mistakes. You seem tired lately. Are you okay? Yeah. Maybe you should take a break. But don't worry about work. It's not that. Is it Mom and Dad? I'll handle them. At David's suggestion, I left my job and became a housewife. Staying at home all the time was mentally and physically exhausting, but I didn't want to waste David's consideration. David told Catherine and Edward not to overburden me. Things got a little better, but the harassment didn't stop completely. If you're staying home, you should be more useful. More useful? Just follow my instructions. Catherine handed me a piece of paper. It was a list of things she wanted me to buy. Today? Of course. Hurry up if you don't want David to find out. I had no choice. The list included items from the local supermarket as well as a specific cake Catherine loved, which required a train ride to get. Oh, and you'll be paying for it yourself, of course. It was already past 12 p.m., and I had to hurry to be back before David returned home. All I could think about was not causing trouble. I didn't get back until 7 p.m. I bought everything. Why did it take so long? Even a child could do this faster. Just get out of my sight. I went to my room and lied on the bed. I wondered what I was doing with my life. As I stared at the ceiling, there was a knock on the door. I sat up and answered. The door opened slowly, and Wilhelmina stood there. Wilhelmina, what's wrong? I'm sorry. What? I should have been more careful. What are you talking about? About Dad and Mom. My heart nearly stopped. Oh, you don't have to hide it. You knew? I overheard them talking. I see. I'll protect you, Lavinia. I can't let you do that, Wilhelmina. Leave it to me. I've got a plan. But David... I was determined to keep this from David at all costs. Don't worry about that. With Wilhelmina aware of the situation, I felt less alone. I had been feeling isolated, but not anymore. Then Wilhelmina said something surprising when we were all together. I'm going to work at Bro's company. What? You go to a good university. You could get a better job. I've made my decision. Wilhelmina was set to graduate next year. She was so talented that she could easily get a job anywhere, just as Catherine said. Why David's company? At least go to Dad's company. Mom, it's decided. Wilhelmina wants this. But... Edward whispered something to Catherine. All right, maybe that's a good idea. She changed her mind suddenly. I wondered what Edward had said. And David, take care of Wilhelmina. Of course. What kind of answer is that? Seriously. After graduating from college, Wilhelmina joined David's company. Being naturally intelligent and talented, Wilhelmina quickly took on various responsibilities. Around this time, Edward started being unusually kind to me. Given what had happened before, it filled me with fear again. However, something surprising happened. Lavinia, I'm truly sorry for what I did. An apology now doesn't change anything. I know, but I'll talk to Mom and make sure it doesn't happen again. I'm really sorry. I couldn't believe what was happening in front of me. Edward even made a deep apology. I mean it. Please stop. I still don't trust you. I'll need some time to see if things really change. All right, I understand. Despite being so capable, Wilhelmina could have easily gotten a better job, just as Catherine said. But this peace was just the calm before the storm. Though the harassment stopped, David's behavior started to change. You're working too much lately. It's a crucial time right now. Maybe, but this is too much. I have to do everything I can now. Even so, David wouldn't stop. Wilhelmina and I talked about this strange situation. What is David trying to achieve? I know he's focused on work, but... I'm sorry, I don't know either. But this can't go on. Yeah, we need to do something about it. We continued to tell David to rest more. But he threw himself into his work as if trying to escape something. He also started increasing his intake of sleeping pills. I knew something had to be done, and then I got sad news from Dad. Mom had been in a car accident and passed away. Please come home immediately. I understand. I was worried about David, but I couldn't bring him in his current state. With all that's happened, please take care of David. Yes, I'll take care of him. So, I returned to my family home. Seeing Mom's cold body, all I could feel was a sense of disbelief. Had Mom done something wrong? Thanks for coming back. Of course. By the way, where's David? David is. I explained David's situation to Dad. I see. I can't believe David. I'm worried about him, but we need to properly send off Mom first. You're right. We quickly prepared for Mom's funeral. At times like these, people usually cry, but I couldn't shed a tear. When the funeral began, I felt more empty than sad. I couldn't accept the reality that Mom was gone. Before I knew it, the funeral was over. Are you all right? Yeah, but I still can't believe Mom is gone. Me neither. The house feels empty without her constant energy. That's because you were always getting into trouble, and she was scolding you. Was I? Yes, you were. That night, Dad and I reminisced about Mom until late. We must have fallen asleep on the sofa because the morning light was already coming in. Did you sleep well? Yes. Lavinia, you should go back now. What? David is waiting for you. You should go to him. But... It's okay. Mom would want you to. All right, I'll go. As I stood up to prepare, my smartphone rang. Who's calling this early? It was Wilhelmina. Hello? Wilhelmina, is something wrong? It's Bro. What happened to David? He didn't wake up, so I went to his room. I left the house immediately and headed to the hospital. Lavinia. Wilhelmina ran towards me as soon as she saw me. Wilhelmina. She was crying heavily. Where's David? She pointed to where my in-laws were standing. I helped Wilhelmina sit on a nearby sofa and slowly approached them. I opened the door slowly and saw someone lying down. There were 2 police officers in the room. Are you his wife? Yes. What happened to David? There is a possibility of suicide. Suicide? That can't be. I walked on trembling legs. There lay David, looking as if he were merely sleeping. Reality suddenly hit me, and I collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. Wilhelmina came over, lifted me up, and led me out of the room. Why would David? I don't know. I can't understand it either. According to Wilhelmina, when David didn't get up at his usual time, she went to check on him and found him lying in bed, already gone. They called an ambulance, but it was too late. The police were called, and they suspected suicide. They found a lot of empty sleeping pill containers in the trash can. The family was questioned by the police, but they hadn't seen David since he went into his room.
This can't be. Sure, he was struggling, but he wouldn't leave us like this.
I know, right? I think the same. The autopsy confirmed that David had taken a large amount of sleeping pills, leading to his death. The pills were properly prescribed, and David had been seeing a doctor. Still grieving Mom's death, I now had to attend David's funeral. Just like with Mom, I couldn't cry. This time, though, the reason was different. I desperately wanted to know why this had happened. After the funeral, while resting in the lounge. Finally, it's over. Funerals are so exhausting.
It's our son's funeral. How can you say that?
I'm just stating a fact.
We're not the only ones here.
She probably meant me too. Anyway, it's partly this woman's fault that he died. How could it be my fault? I thought she had calmed down lately, but her core real attitude hadn't changed. Shouldn't she be mourning David's death and reflecting on his life? Yet, she kept criticizing me. Edward tried to calm her down, but it didn't work. If he hadn't married you, he wouldn't have done this. We could have had grandchildren by now. Wilhelmina, returning from the restroom, jumped into the fray.
That's impossible.
Wilhelmina, do you have complaints about me too?
Complaints? Of course I do. Do you know how badly you treated Bro? What are you saying, Wilhelmina?
It's not Lavinia's fault. Bro died because of you too. Wilhelmina stormed out. What are you doing? Go after her. You're useless even now. I clenched my fists as tightly as I could. Frustration and anger welled up inside me. Catherine continued to look down on me until we left the funeral home. Ignoring her, I chased after Wilhelmina and found her sitting on a bench in a nearby park. There you are, Wilhelmina. Let's go home and figure out what happened to David together. Okay. When we got home, I was so exhausted that I fell asleep immediately. As if I forget everything. And then the next morning. Can you get the newspaper quickly? Even though the funeral had just ended, there was no sign of grief. It felt like a normal morning. Yes. Hurry up. I could have refused, but my body moved out of habit. I wished it was just a dream. As instructed, I went to check the mailbox. I found an envelope tucked in with the newspaper. An envelope? Who could it be from? I took it out and checked the sender, but there was no name. There was just one sentence. Make sure Mom doesn't notice. With that, I understood who it was for and who it was from. I hid the envelope in my pocket and went back inside. What were you doing? You're useless. She snatched the newspaper from my hand. I sneaked back to the bedroom and opened the envelope. Inside, written in familiar handwriting, was something shocking. When I finished reading it, I felt like I was going to explode with anger and fear. I struggled to control my trembling body and took a deep breath.
Just you wait and see.
I immediately began to take action. I went straight to Wilhelmina's room. Lavinia, please come in. She had dark circles under her eyes. And swollen lids, likely from crying all night. Sorry to bother you, but I need you to see something. I showed her the letter from David.
This is. Maybe he anticipated this outcome. So he planned to die from the start?
The letter began. By the time you read this, Lavinia, I might not be alive. I wanted to stay with you forever, but I couldn't bear it anymore. The letter contained even more shocking revelations. Apparently, Edward's company was struggling financially. He had suggested handing the company over to Wilhelmina. It seemed they intended to use Wilhelmina to secure funding.
If this is true, did I make things worse?
No, you didn't. They were reluctant at first. That's why they suddenly changed their minds.
What? Edward probably thought that if Wilhelmina joined David's company, it would solve their problems since she was family.
That's awful. Edward must have whispered this plan to Catherine when she reacted at that time.
I wanted to cause them trouble. I suspected Dad's company was struggling.
It's not your fault, Wilhelmina. You were trying to help me. But still. The letter ended with, I never told you, but I'm adopted. My position worsened after Wilhelmina was born. I'm sorry I kept it a secret. Please tell Wilhelmina that she was always my pride and joy. Even though I resented her birth at times, she was the sister I loved dearly. How much did you know about the adoption?
I didn't know anything. My parents never told me.
I started to remember our college days. The friend who was adopted was David himself. No wonder he knew so much about adoption. He probably wanted to prevent others from experiencing what he did. But now, the problem was what to do next. I felt so sorry for David. I needed to get back at his parents somehow. Then Wilhelmina remembered something.
How could I forget this? I'm so stupid.
What did you think of?
When I said I would protect you, Lavinia, I installed surveillance cameras in the house.
Surveillance cameras?
Yes, they're very small, so no one noticed.
Can we see the footage now?
Yes, we can.
The footage showed the two of them verbally abusing David in the living room. Calling him useless, saying they should never have adopted him, it went on for hours.
How did I not notice this?
As we checked more footage, we found damning evidence. I felt an anger I had never experienced before. Wilhelmina seemed to feel the same. We prepared and confronted the in-laws. Can we talk for a moment? What? I'm busy. It won't take long.
Did you two kill Bro?
What are you talking about?
That's enough. Stop joking around. You can't escape this.
You don't have any proof. The police said it was suicide.
That's right. Even if Wilhelmina is our daughter, this is unacceptable. How can you say that? Look at this.
Wilhelmina had prepared a laptop. It showed footage from the day David died.
You didn't notice, did you? Bro and I placed cameras all over the house.
What? I checked the camera footage as mentioned in the letter. It clearly showed them forcing David to take pills. Other footage showed them putting what seemed to be sleeping pills in his drinks, leaving him dazed and vulnerable.
How? We set up cameras. Dad!
Edward tried to stand up, but I stopped him.
Sorry, but it's too late to run. What?
We heard police sirens approaching. Give it up. The in-laws were taken away by the police. Of course, this isn't the end of everything. But I felt a little lighter inside. They were charged with murder using the camera footage as evidence. I shuddered to think what would have happened if Wilhelmina hadn't set up the cameras.
Are you okay, Wilhelmina?
I'm fine.
But your parents.
They're not parents. They're just criminals. As a result, Edward's company went bankrupt. It was already in a state where it could have collapsed at any moment, so it was just a matter of time. Both were found guilty and are now behind bars. I decided to visit them to see their faces. I also discovered that Edward's cancer was a lie. He made it up as an excuse to have us live with them. Fittingly, he was too ill to meet, but I was able to see Catherine. You look well. What do you want? Just checking in. How's prison? What? I hope you die easily here. You're such a hateful woman. I'll take that as a compliment. Keep surviving as best you can. Goodbye. I returned to the in-laws' house one last time. Wilhelmina and I prepared to move. I still can't believe David was adopted. He's still my beloved bro. Yes, it doesn't change anything. We moved into a new place and lived together. I took over as president of David's company. Wilhelmina and I would carry David's legacy together until we could smile and reunite with him one day. I had twins. Looking forward to your $10,000 gift for the baby shower. My sister, Sarah said with a triumphant voice. So, I responded loudly to her like this. Okay. I'll go with my husband, the real estate king worth $500 billion. What did you say? I could hear her surprised voice over the phone. She must have heard from our parents that my spouse was some shabby, ordinary man. $500 billion? What do you mean? Just what I said. She seemed confused by my words. I couldn't help but laugh. Then Sarah, catching on, retorted. That can't be. Because. Let's talk about it when we meet in person. Including that thing you did back then. Wait a minute. Anne. I'll be there tomorrow then. I said so and hung up the phone unilaterally. She tried to call me back many times, but I ignored all her calls. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. Imagining her regretful face, I laughed out loud. My name is Anne. I'm a 38-year-old housewife. Living with my husband, Joe, it's just the two of us. A housekeeper does all our housework, so I live a leisurely life every day. But actually, Joe is my second husband. I divorced my first husband 6 years ago. I met him later when I was working in a restaurant and remarried. I married my first husband, Kevin, because my parents recommended it. My dad liked Kevin, who was the president of a company that did business with my parents' company, and that's how it started. I had no say in the matter, and the marriage was decided the day after I met him. As the eldest daughter, I was always told to take over the family business, so it didn't strike me as odd. Therefore, our marriage was far from sweet. Kevin, a CEO with an annual revenue of $5 billion, hardly came home and was always out having fun. Even on the rare occasions he did come home, he would just make a disgusted face at me and go to his bedroom. When I started to hate this life, I was suddenly called back to my parents' house. And get a divorce. What? Why all of a sudden? I was confused by my mother's sudden words. Kevin's company was thriving. There was no benefit to divorcing now. Hoping that my situation had moved them, I was next confronted with a shocking scene. Why are Kevin and Sarah? Sarah is my sister. My parents adored Sarah, who was 10 years younger than me, as if they barely saw me. And there she was, walking into the room arm in arm with Kevin. Anne. I've taken a liking to Kevin. So give him to me. Give him to you? Kevin is not a toy. But Kevin likes me better. Right? Sarah said, leaning into Kevin. Then Kevin looked at me with a sleazy smile. The moment I saw those eyes, I had a bad feeling. Younger women are better than middle-aged ones, and Sarah is prettier. I think she's better suited to be a CEO's wife. How could you? Mom. Being discarded for being older and not as pretty as Sarah, I sought help from my mother. I was raised strictly as the eldest daughter, but I believed my mother loved me. That's what I thought. That's why I told you to get a divorce. If Sarah wants him, you must give him to her. You're the older sister, aren't you?
How could?
I was speechless. I knew my mother had a soft spot for Sarah, but I thought she would be on my side at a time like this. Then my father spoke quietly. Just get the divorce already. Starting today, Sarah will be the successor of this house. Having a divorce in your history is shameful. Once divorced, get out of here immediately.
Dad.
With tears in my eyes, I wrote the divorce papers. Then, as my parents told me, I packed up my belongings and was quickly kicked out of the house.
And you'll be in trouble now, won't you? Here's something in place of compensation.
Sarah is so kind. Be thankful to her. They mockingly threw a bundle of money at me. Holding that bundle of cash, I was at a loss for what to do next. What should I do now? Being a full-time housewife, I had no means to earn a living. After all, I had been trained for marriage, never even had a part-time job. For now, I decided to go to a hotel and think about what to do next. I moved to the neighboring town and went to a real estate agent. Because I had some savings originally, I could easily rent a place for one person, so I absolutely didn't want to use the compensation money thrown at me. With the thought of someday getting my revenge, I started taking action. After renting a one-bedroom apartment and catching my breath, the next step was to find a job. However, finding a job proved difficult. Then, a call from Sarah came through on my smartphone. Anne? Didn't you know this whole area is Kevin's territory? You won't get hired anywhere you apply. How could this be? I was at a loss. Ultimately, just as Sarah said, I couldn't find a job. Without the ability to work, my savings would eventually run out. I decided to live in a town far away. The place I moved to was a peaceful town with the scent of the sea breeze. It was a nice place. I got a job at a local restaurant and started working there, including lodging.
Hey, give me some liquor.
Right away.
I want some chicken over here.
Understood. While I was new to serving food, the customers were all kind to me.
Anne's smile makes me feel like I can keep going tomorrow.
Aren't you going to marry again, Anne? Marriage again.
What a waste.
Being still young, many suggested I remarry, and each time I would avoid the topic. I didn't want to end up with someone like Kevin if I remarried.
And could I get a beer?
Hi Joe, you've worked hard today. Sure. While everyone suggested I remarry, regular customer Joe never did. I found our conversations very comfortable, and eventually, I looked forward to his visits. It was after 3 years in this town that Joe asked me out on a date.
How about going to see the sea? Eh?
Since it's right in front of us. Seeing Joe, usually so calm, fumbling for words made me laugh. I didn't dislike the idea. I accepted his invitation. Our first date was just a walk on the beach in front of the restaurant, which was quite uneventful, but we talked about various things. Joe told me about losing his parents early and living alone in this town he loved. I shared about my family and Kevin. Then, Joe cried on my behalf. Maybe I should have cried like this. Watching tears flow from his eyes, I thought so. After that, we went out many times together and eventually started dating. Honestly, I can't remember who said I love you first. But our relationship began very naturally. And about a year later, Joe proposed. I can't imagine a life without you, Anne.
Is that a proposal?
That's the idea. I laughed at Joe's lack of confidence and accepted his proposal. Then we got married. I had no intention of informing my parents or Sarah, but Joe suggested we at least let my parents know, so I contacted them for the first time in 4 years and decided to return to my childhood home. Oh, you're still alive. Remarriage? Go ahead, but we won't provide any support. If you're going to remarry such a poor-looking man, don't ever come back to this house again. My face turned red with anger as they said this in front of Joe. Indeed, Joe isn't into luxury. Even so, he was wearing a high-brand suit today. Despite that, I no longer wanted any relationship with such parents. I was about to speak out in anger when. Then, I will marry Anne. We won't contact you in the future, nor will we ask for any support. Joe. My parents were surprised by Joe's straightforward attitude, but soon started to express their indignation. Joe, with a smile, brushed off my parents and took my hand, leading me out of the house. I didn't expect them to be that harsh. I'm sorry for making you feel uncomfortable. It's okay, don't worry about it. I feel a bit relieved now, I said, smiling at him. Joe relaxed, seeing my expression. And then, we returned to our new home. After a while, the number of calls from unknown numbers increased. I ignored all these calls and consulted with Joe. Let's ignore it. But it's creepy, so let's change it tomorrow. Thank you, that sounds good. I was very grateful to Joe for his prompt response. The next morning, Joe quickly made time for us to go change our phone number. Then, the calls from unknown numbers stopped. I felt relieved. However, after a while, calls from unknown numbers started coming in again. Hello. Even when I answered, the caller would hang up without saying anything. It made me feel very uncomfortable, so I consulted with Joe again. Then Joe said, just ignore all calls from unknown numbers. And I followed his advice, ignoring all the calls. Eventually, the calls stopped, and I soon forgot about them. Then one day, I received a call from my childhood home. I had forgotten to delete it from my phone book after cutting ties, so I answered the call. But it wasn't my mother on the other end, it was Sarah. Hello? Anne? Are you doing well? Sarah. Don't sound so scared. It's not unreasonable for my voice to betray my feelings, considering she's the last person I want to talk to. For the time being, I decided to confirm the first question that came to mind. How do you know my number? I found out easily. You know, I have money. Her way of speaking confirmed to me that she hadn't changed at all. I thought about hanging up quickly. But before I could, Sarah started talking cheerfully. I had twins. I'm looking forward to your $10,000 gift for the baby shower, she said with a triumphant voice. I answered her loudly. Okay. I'll go with my husband, the real estate king worth $500 billion. What? I could hear her surprised voice over the phone. She must have heard from our parents that my partner was some shabby, ordinary man. $500 billion? What do you mean? Just what I said. Sarah seemed confused by my words. I couldn't help but laugh. Then she retorted. That can't be. Because. Let's talk about it when we meet in person. Including that thing you did back then. Wait a minute. Anne. I'll be there tomorrow then. I said so and hung up the phone unilaterally. She tried to call back many times, but I ignored all her calls. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. I waited for Joe to come home and explained the situation to him. Then he suggested with a laugh. I'll go in my usual outfit. I nodded in agreement. And I decided to wear my usual clothes and return to my childhood home as well. I'm home. You're back. And did you bring your husband? Eh? Sarah rushed out to greet us with a smile but was surprised by our attire. That's not surprising since the clothes we wore were bought from a no-brand, common store. Both the t-shirts and pants were around $20 each. What's with those shabby clothes? Aren't you a real estate king? I responded with a smile to Sarah's words. Then Sarah made her own interpretations and looked at me with a mocking expression. So, it was a lie after all. You can't hide it with pretense. It's not a lie, I said, pointing to the screen of my smartphone. There, Joe's name and photo were displayed. After looking at it closely, Sarah exclaimed,
Wait, that major real estate group? The president of that? No way!
It's not a lie. Sarah glared at me with frustration. Then she pointed at our clothes and started to insult us. Then why are you wearing such shabby clothes? I gave Sarah a patronizing look in response. We have to match the economic situation of the family home, don't we? Are you saying our house has fallen? No, I judged that this level of attire was appropriate. Joe and I usually dress formally when we go to someone's home. We have never been disrespectful enough to wear t-shirts and jeans. That's why we deliberately chose this attire this time. There are 2 reasons for this. First, as earlier, to make Sarah misunderstand and ruin her plan. Seeing her frustrated expression means this was a success. And second, I started walking towards the living room. Joe followed behind me, and Sarah chased after us. Surely, there's no one as reassuring to have by my side as Joe. I forcefully opened the living room door. Be quiet. Open it more quietly, like Sarah. What's with that cheap look? I'm really disappointed in you. As soon as the door opened and my parents said that, I couldn't help but laugh. They looked at me, still laughing, as if I were something suspicious. Sarah mentioned that Anne supposedly married a rich man, but it seems it was just in showing off. Right. With such an outfit, it's clear. We don't want you wearing such cheap clothes in our house, I retorted while still laughing at my parents' arbitrary remarks. Maybe the business is failing because you judge people by their clothes? What did you say? My parents were shocked by my comment. But Sarah was just standing there, dumbfounded. I decided to enlighten her gently. I heard it was a deficit last year. How is it going this term, still uncertain? It's none of your business. Actually, I'd like to say it's none of my business, but unfortunately, our family ties haven't been legally severed. My father glared at me with a look of frustration. That expression reminded me, Sarah takes after our father, and I realized I take after our mother. In fact, since Kevin married Sarah, my father's company has been on a downward spiral. After receiving Sarah's call, I had Joe confirm it, and far from recovering, their performance has been worsening. The second reason we wore low-priced clothes was this. We wanted to let our nearly bankrupt parents underestimate us first, so when they were told about the bankruptcy, the impact would be greater. I continued talking while sighing at my glaring parents. I intend to renounce any inheritance when the time comes. You were planning on inheriting the estate? All of Mom and Dad's money is mine. Sarah, who had been silent until now, cut in. It seems she didn't understand what I was saying. I could explain it nicely, but honestly, it's tiresome. However, without explaining, the conversation wouldn't move forward. Just when I thought that, Joe succinctly explained in my place. Your parents' company is about to go bankrupt. Eh? Sarah looked at our parents with a shocked face. And they awkwardly turned away. Then, unbelievably, Sarah wrapped her arms around Joe. Then, Joe, could you cover for them? In return, you can do whatever you like with me. Just kidding. Despite Sarah's light-hearted words, a tension filled the air between me and Joe. Joe sighed deeply, forcefully removed Sarah's arms, and spoke up. Can you not do that? It's disgusting. Disgusting? Me? Yes, you're disgusting. Joe emphasized, as if to make sure his point got across. Shocked by the blunt rejection, Sarah stepped back and glared at me, teary-eyed.
How dare you say something so rude? I'm prettier than that plain and over there.
That's impossible. She is slimmer, her skin is clearer, and not just her features, but her heart is much purer. He said, listing my good qualities one after another. Being good at cooking, intellectual, considerate, and more honest than anyone else. Hearing this, it's as if he's describing a perfect being, which is somewhat embarrassing. I tugged lightly on Joe's sleeve twice to stop him. Then Joe turned to me and smiled. This modesty is also a charm that your sister lacks.
What are you talking about?
Sarah retorted angrily. Since the last time I saw her, her body had significantly enlarged. She must have gained at least 44 pounds. Her face, once praised for its beauty, was now covered in acne and blemishes, far from pretty. Presumably, pampered by our parents and affected by age, her metabolism slowed down, leading to weight gain. Typical her, I sighed internally. Yet, our parents defended her.
Sarah just gained a little weight after giving birth. She'll return to her former self soon.
No, this is clearly due to an unhealthy lifestyle.
Stay out of it.
My mother, face red with anger, yelled at me. The mother I couldn't oppose while living at home now didn't scare me at all after 6 years. To such a mother, I revealed another truth. By the way, there's a chance that the sons Sarah gave birth to aren't Kevin's, right?
What? Is that true, Sarah?
As I spoke, Kevin's voice came from behind. Turning around, I saw Kevin holding 2 babies.
Long time no see, Kevin. What does this mean?
He approached me aggressively. Joe stepped in front of me and began to explain on my behalf. I heard about Kevin from Anne. We had someone look into it before coming here. I didn't expect to find evidence in just half a day, though. Joe said, pulling out his smartphone. It showed a photo of a man and a woman holding hands, entering a hotel. Upon seeing it, Kevin exclaimed,
Sarah! You're still in touch with him?
Then, without being asked, Kevin began to spill details.
Right after we got married, Sarah cheated on me with that man in the photo. She said it was just once, so I forgave her.
Kevin said, glaring at her. Then Sarah glared back at him and retorted,
You forgave me, but you, becoming a subsidiary of our family company, are too arrogant, Kevin.
It was all Sarah's insistence. Sarah and Kevin were uglily blaming each other, their argument escalating. It seems Kevin's company became a subsidiary of Sarah's father's company soon after their marriage, leading to a rapid decline in its performance.
I wish I hadn't divorced Anne. Kevin, what are you saying? There's no way you'd prefer Anne over me.
Sarah screamed hysterically, to which Kevin raised his voice as well. I guess so.
And didn't cheat on me, and I was free to do as I pleased. If there were kids with Anne, she would take care of them, so I wouldn't have to.
Kevin realized something mid-sentence, his expression changing. I had a bad feeling about it.
That's it. And let's remarry. It must have been our destiny.
Kevin, lost in his delusions, kneeled before me. I recoiled from the sheer creepiness. Joe stepped between me and Kevin. And is my wife. There's no chance she'll remarry you.
Who are you? Get out of the way!
Kevin shouted at Joe with irritation. From behind Joe, I made my stance clear to Kevin.
I could never remarry you. I wouldn't want your children. Oh, you couldn't have them anyway. But still, no.
What do you mean I couldn't have them? Kevin looked dumbfounded. As did our parents and Sarah. I decided to explain to them. When I was still married to Kevin, we went to a gynecologist. Remember? I had tests done. Right, you dragged me to the gynecologist once. But it was your fault, wasn't it? Kevin kept insisting his health was fine, clearly wanting to believe I was the problem. I confronted Kevin with the truth after 6 years. The one who can't have children is you, Kevin.
Lies, lies. Then whose are these kids?
Unfortunately, they're not yours. Kevin slumped upon hearing this. The housekeeper hurried to take the babies from Kevin's hands, with a stunned Sarah in the background. So, Sarah, it seems they aren't Kevin's children.
Sarah, why didn't you tell me about such a defect? If you had told me properly, by now.
Sarah started to shift the blame masterfully. I listened dispassionately until she ran out of steam. Then laughed and said, "Isn't it your own fault?"
What did you say? Then give me Joe.
He already said no. Then give me money. Families should help each other out. You say that. Her words irritated me. There was never any familial support for me. In times of hardship, instead of solidarity, I was met with cold indifference. Unfortunately, I'm not part of your family.
I am, right? Anne, don't be so grumpy.
Sarah's words were irritating, but taking them seriously was pointless. I took a deep breath. Before I could retort, my mother spoke up. And I'm sorry for everything. But we're really struggling. If you really have money, could you help us? That's right. As Sarah said, families help each other. Can't you forgive what happened before? What on earth are these people saying? Their words left me utterly baffled. There was no point in hoping for their remorse. I discarded the slight affection I had left for this family and looked at them coldly. Noticing my gaze, they momentarily trembled but soon plastered on insincere smiles. We apologize for everything. Yes, yes. We've said this much, so you should compromise a bit. Their unrepentant attitude made me sigh. Then, with a smile just around my lips, I asked my mother.
Why do I have to do so much for a half-sister and biological parents who bullied me?
A half-sister? What are you talking about? Sarah is my child. Even with such a clueless response from my father, it seemed my mother understood what that implied. Her face turned pale. What are you talking about, Anne? It's fine if you want to play dumb. I once saw Mom cheating. In fact, when I was still living at home, I caught my mother bringing a man into the house. It happened shortly after we got married. Kevin and I were away on business, and Sarah was on a trip with her friends. It was just my mother and me at home. When I returned from an errand my mother had asked me to run, I found unfamiliar men's shoes. At first, I thought we had a visitor and went to the living room, but no one was there. Curious, I then heard voices from the bedroom. I wanted to block my ears. But the next words I heard shocked me. My husband doesn't know that Sarah is your child.
Sarah isn't our dad's child.
I covered my mouth with both hands to prevent myself from screaming out loud. I wanted to hear more, but sensing they were about to leave the bedroom, I hurried out to kill time and returned home when I thought the coast was clear. Curious about that incident, I investigated right after marrying Joe. The man turned out to be Mike, a longtime friend of my father. and the affair was still ongoing.
So, because you've been cheating on the family with him, you threw me out when Sarah wanted Kevin. What do you mean?
My mother, turning pale, shook her head in denial. Seeing her reaction, even my father seemed to grasp the meaning, his face reddening with anger towards my mother. I decided to give my father the name of my mother's affair partner.
Mom's affair partner is Mike. Mike? You mean she had an affair with him? Yes, even now.
My words left my father dumbstruck. Mike was considered a close family friend, so the betrayal must have hit him hard. Despite the situation, I felt no sympathy for my father.
What? I'm not Dad's child.
Sarah stood there, dumbfounded, with no one to retort. Are we done here?
I've already decided to renounce any inheritance, so do as you please from now on. But in return, I won't help you. Please leave me out of any future matters.
My voice shook a bit towards the end, but I managed to say everything I wanted. All right, let's go. I signaled Joe with my eyes, feeling refreshed. Just before leaving the room, I turned back and pulled an envelope from my bag.
Oh, right. This is the compensation money you threw at me. I haven't used it, so it's still the full amount. Consider this a return for your baby shower gift. It's a bit more than you asked for,
I said, placing the envelope in front of Sarah. Sarah, shocked, didn't move. We left the four of them behind and exited my childhood home. Afterwards, my parents didn't divorce, but their relationship turned cold. My mother's actions were severely restricted, and her affair with Mike was forcibly ended. My father stepped down from his position as president, tried living on his pension but failed due to his long-standing spending habits, and eventually had to sell the house. Passing by my old home recently, I saw it had been demolished, which somehow made me feel a bit relieved. Apparently, they now live in a rental apartment, struggling to keep up with the rent with both parents having to work. My mother, having never worked before, hasn't managed to keep a job and moves from one to another. My sister and her husband divorced. Naturally, Sarah took custody of the child. Sarah, having never worked and now with 2 children, struggled to live and ended up pushing herself onto her affair partner. But he was already married, and she's now in a difficult situation. While I could sympathize with them being half-related, remembering all they did makes me think it's their own fault. After his divorce, Kevin attempted to revive his company alone but was already tarnished by a bad reputation, leading to an exodus of business partners. Moreover, leaving the umbrella organization caused his stocks to crash, and it seems his business couldn't sustain itself. Eventually, his company went bankrupt. Also, amidst having no money, he got scammed in a marriage fraud on a dating app, losing the compensation money Sarah had paid him, and ended up broke. Furthermore, he's taken out loans from dubious sources and is now working hard in construction to repay his debts every day. He even called Joe asking for money but was firmly rejected since they're strangers to each other. He was demanding a divorce from me until the end, so there's no room for sympathy. As for me, I'm actually expecting our first child. Joe was overjoyed upon hearing the news and has already started designing a home prioritizing our child. He's even prematurely selecting babysitters, which makes me laugh at his excitement. It's going to be a boy. Neither Joe nor I have relatives anymore. But the people in our town are very kind, already offering various kinds of help.
Being born to a town full of such supportive people, this child is truly fortunate.
Joe and I talk about this every night.
How are you feeling, Anne? I feel quite well today. That's great. I hope a healthy baby is born.
Thank you. Everyone greets me like this when I go for a walk, which makes me very happy. And I'm truly glad to have moved to this town. And I couldn't decide between blue and green for the blanket, so I ended up buying both.
It's still too early for that.
While I scold Joe for buying something nearly every day, I'm knitting socks for the baby. I plan to finish them a week before the due date.
Ah, it kicked. Really? Daddy's here.
Joe reacts to my words, putting his ear to my stomach and talking to it. Just at that moment, the baby kicked again. He responded. Seems he likes me. Daddy loves you too.
Joe, really?
While I'm slightly exasperated, I find such moments endearing. Immersed in this happiness, I start knitting the socks again. My name is Olivia. I'm 35 and have been married to my husband Lucas for 7 years. We have a 5-year-old son, Thomas. Normally, it's just the three of us living a peaceful life, but I have one major grievance. It's the long vacations and Christmas when we go to Lucas's parents' house. Only his parents live there, but during the holidays, his sister and her family join us too. During these gatherings, which sometimes exceed 10 people, I'm expected to handle all the meal preparations. Because I'm married to the eldest son, everyone seems to think it's my duty. His sisters don't help me at all. On top of that, they leave their kids with me and go out to have fun. Even Lucas doesn't offer me any help, so as the holidays approach, I start to dread them. Just the thought of preparing meals at my in-laws is painful, not to mention the harassment I endure from Lucas's mother, Ava. From the beginning of our marriage, Ava has criticized everything I do. The first time we went to visit after getting married, she told me out of the blue, "Olivia, please prepare all the meals while you're here." I was shocked. It was my first time in their kitchen, and everything was thrown at me. In a panic, I checked the fridge, finding almost nothing. I had to start by shopping for groceries. "Do you want anything specific to eat?" I asked with a smile without showing my irritation.
Just make something delicious. Don't check with us every time, just get on with the cooking.
Jackson, Lucas's father, seemed nice and calm, but I couldn't figure out what he really thought. Ava was always openly hostile towards me. Even when I casually asked Lucas about his parents' favorite dishes, "Anything's fine, don't worry too much about it," he always responds so casually. Lucas is originally unreliable, but since then, my distrust in him has only grown. In the end, I decided to make a safe choice and cook curry. As the smell of curry began to waft from the kitchen, Ava started her snide remarks.
"Curry gives me heartburn. I'll have to take some antacid tonight."
Without time to make anything else, I served the curry for dinner. Ava complained that the curry was too spicy, or that she preferred pork over beef.
"Anyone can make a decent curry,"
she remarked, leaving the comment hanging in the air, yet she went for seconds. Meanwhile, Jackson ate without saying a word, but after he finished, he let out a deep sigh and left the room. While Ava's reactions are irritating, Jackson's sigh feels more condemning than her snide remarks. Dealing with just my in-laws' meals is stressful enough, but it gets even worse when Lucas's sisters and their families join. Harper's family consists of Lucas's sister Harper, her husband Ethan, and their daughter. Harper, in her appearance and manner of speaking, is frighteningly similar to Ava. Together, they hurl insults at me, making it feel like there are two Avas. When Harper comes to visit, she expects me to handle everything from cooking to making beds. Of course, she doesn't thank me, she takes it for granted. Ethan, usually quiet around his in-laws and Harper, becomes tyrannical when they're not around. "Go buy cigarettes," he'd demand, treating me more like a housemaid than family. Their daughter Emma, much like Harper, seems spiteful.
"Olivia, we're out of juice."
Then Ethan would join in, ordering,
"Olivia, I'm out of beer. Bring some."
Laughing foolishly, the two of them enjoy themselves. They are usually quiet in front of Harper, probably because they're used to being scolded by her. They seem to let loose when at the in-laws. For me, who ends up doing all the work, it's unbearable. Natalie's family includes Lucas's sister Natalie, her husband Mason, and their son. Compared to the insidious Ava and Harper, Natalie is brighter and easier to talk to. She always comes to chat while I'm preparing meals. While it's nice to be approached so casually, Natalie doesn't help at all. At first, I used to listen to her seriously, but if she's not going to help, she's just in the way. Eventually, when I responded non-committally to her chatter, Are you even listening to me? She'd snap. Busy with work, I had to listen to Natalie's endless, meaningless stories about her husband's complaints or her in-laws' snide remarks. I wanted to vent to Natalie too, but I couldn't dare speak ill of the in-laws. As soon as Natalie realizes I'm not fully engaged, she'd tattle to Ava and Harper. Then I'd get scolded by both Ava and Harper.
Just because she's your sister-in-law doesn't mean you can ignore her. You should at least listen to her. Such a mean spirit, bullying your weaker sister.
They'd freely insult me. I wanted to retort, who's the mean one here? But I didn't have the courage. All I could do was endure the long vacations and Christmases. Even when I was pregnant, the treatment didn't change.
I worked as usual the day after I gave birth.
Ava would brag, expecting the same from me. I heard from Lucas that Ava had been badly harassed by her mother-in-law too. It seems she's intent on making me experience the same misery. I wish she would stop returning the ill treatment she received onto her daughter-in-law. Thomas was born in December, so that year, we didn't go to the in-laws for Christmas. Why don't you go home alone? I suggested to Lucas. He replied grumpily. It's boring to go back by myself, so let's skip it this year. He informed me that year, the siblings didn't stay at the in-laws for Christmas as usual. They left immediately. Without me there, nobody could handle the meal preparations, so no one stayed overnight. But from the next vacation onwards, the hellish treatment at the in-laws returned. Now, I had to take care of Thomas while preparing meals and accommodations. When Thomas dirted his clothes and I had to do laundry at the in-laws,
since we're letting you use the washing machine, do our laundry as well.
They started making me wash their laundry too. Seeing this, the sisters-in-law began piling their laundry on me as well. I ended up folding Ava's and her sister's laundry. Completely turned into a housemaid, they even dumped childcare on me.
Looking after 1 or 2 kids is the same. Please take care of my son.
They'd say before leaving the newborn with me and going out to have fun with Ava and the family. Only Jackson stayed home, pretending not to notice anything and watching TV. I was shocked when even Lucas left with Ava and the others. From that moment, my affection for Lucas began to cool off. As I was taking care of the 2 babies, one of them would inevitably start crying. Then Jackson would explode in anger.
The noise is so loud, I can't hear the TV. Finally got rid of the annoying bunch, and I can't even watch TV in peace.
Jackson, usually quiet in front of Ava and her daughters, didn't hesitate to complain to me. I hated his silent pressure on regular days, but him yelling like this was just pathetic. The men in this house only act tough when the women aren't around, then badmouth them behind their backs. Especially Mason, who is amusing to watch because of his drastic two-faced nature. In front of Ava and the sisters-in-law, he's all smiles, serving food and drinks diligently. But when the women are absent, he's swapping nasty comments about their wives with Ethan. Not caring about how it affects me, his wife, they freely talk trash.
Why do we have to come here every vacation and Christmas? I feel the same. It's nothing but torture for us husbands.
Moreover,
just between us, my marriage isn't going too well, so next time I might not be here.
They'd say, laughing uproariously. Whether they're joking or serious. They don't care that I'm listening, the conversation escalates. Honestly, my marriage isn't great either. My wife is too domineering, always looking down on me. They glanced around, and seeing it was just me, they began whispering.
My wife is just like her mother. Thinking about her getting even tougher with age is dreadful. Daughters do resemble their mothers, don't they? Recently, even her face is starting to look like her mother's, and it's creepy.
Both of them were rolling on the floor, laughing at their own words. I began to wonder if Lucas also talked badly about me when I wasn't around. These two, laughing at such talk, would transform into entirely different people the moment Ava or the sisters-in-law appeared. They knew that if I told Ava or the sisters-in-law about their behavior, I would be the one accused of lying. That's why they felt free to speak ill of Ava and the sisters-in-law in front of me. Year by year, the workload dumped on me during the holidays at the in-laws grew heavier. Apart from meals, overnight arrangements, childcare, and laundry, now I was even tasked with picking up and dropping off Natalie's family. During a meal right before everyone was about to leave.
I'd like a beer, but I have to drive home, so maybe I should refrain.
Mason mentioned. Hearing this, Ava chimed in. From next time, let's have Olivia pick you up. That way, you can drink beer without any worries. she suggested to Mason. Mason, perhaps jokingly, agreed, but Ava took it seriously. "No, you don't need to go that far," he said. But cutting off his words, Ava commanded, "From now on, you will do the pickups." No one dared to object. In the car back home, even I, usually restrained, lashed out at Lucas. "I'm already cooking, arranging accommodations, taking care of the kids, and even doing everyone's laundry. Now I have to do pickups too." Lucas, taken aback by my anger, was at a loss for words. "Is there no limit to harassing your wife? How much more do they want to exploit me?" My anger was justified. The in-laws' house was in a snowy region, making Christmas visits challenging. Natalie's house was a 2-hour drive one way, but in heavy snow, it could take nearly double that time. I knew Ava would expect me to finish cooking and then go pick up Natalie's family. Exhausted and asked to drive in such conditions was absurd. I'm not accustomed to long drives, and surely Natalie's family would be terrified too. I was furious that Lucas, knowing this, didn't stand up to Ava. "I'm cutting ties with your family. I won't see Jackson, Ava, or your sisters ever again." I didn't want to see Ava or the sisters who did as they pleased. Hoping to calm my fury, he responded with a forced smile. "Totally fine. I'll let Mom and everyone know, so don't worry." When Lucas talks smoothly like this, he's usually just trying to appease the situation. But with his agreement, I finally felt freed from the in-laws' clutches. I marvel at my own patience over the past 7 years of marriage. That Christmas, I went on a trip with Thomas and my parents. It was the first time since Thomas was born that I spent Christmas with my parents. It's rare for us to be together for Christmas. Is it okay for Lucas to go back to his parents alone? Having shared my in-laws' harsh treatment with them, my parents were surprised by the trip. "It's okay. I have Lucas's permission, so he won't complain," I assured them, though I wasn't sure if Lucas had really talked to his parents. He had reluctantly agreed to cut ties with his family after my outburst, but I doubted his parents and sisters would accept it easily. They had been taking it easy so far, likely avoiding preparing meals themselves. However, they probably thought they could easily buy meals from the supermarket, so I assumed they weren't too worried. My parents, seeing their grandson Thomas after a long time, were overjoyed, and Thomas seemed to have fun too. When we visited the in-laws, I never had time to pay attention to Thomas, and I realized he must have felt lonely. Watching the 3 of them having fun, I completely forgot about the in-laws. Then, in the lobby of the luxurious hotel where we were relaxing, a familiar man walked in with a young woman on his arm. He resembled Mason, but he was supposed to be at the in-laws. The more I looked, the more he seemed familiar, and it appeared he noticed my stare. The man made a surprised face and quickly turned away. Likely because he was up to something shady. I pretended not to see and averted my gaze from the man. Just then, I received a call from Lucas. "Hello, what's up? Please, can you come to the family home right now? It's chaos here, nothing is prepared. Haven't we agreed that I wouldn't go anymore from this year?" I wasn't surprised, I had expected something like this. "I did mention it, but it seems the message didn't get across," he replied. I figured he hadn't really talked to his parents. I had already informed them that I wouldn't be able to pick up Natalie's family. Natalie had complained, but it seemed she had been pacified. Lucas was desperately trying to get me to come back. But I was more focused on the commotion and what sounded like Natalie's voice in the background. "Mason has run off with some woman. He said he was going to work, but when I called the office, they said he was off today." Hearing Natalie's words confirmed that the man I saw was indeed her husband. "Mason is at the hotel we're staying at right now," I responded. Lucas was taken aback by the sudden shift in the conversation. "What? My brother-in-law is there?" I decided to tell the truth, thinking it would serve Natalie right for how she had treated me. Natalie must have heard Lucas's voice, as she snatched his mobile phone and started shouting at me. "Mason is there! Where are you right now?" Natalie screamed, almost rupturing my eardrums. "Young and beautiful woman, high-class hotel," I replied. Next, Ava grabbed the phone and started yelling at me. "How dare you go to a hotel on your own? You think that's acceptable?" Even though they're shouting at me loudly, I can hear them. "I've discussed this with Lucas. I have his permission to not associate with you anymore," I replied, deliberately provoking her. Ava started screaming something incomprehensible. Then Harper snatched the phone. "We can't even have a meal without you. Please, somehow come back," Harper said, unusually polite, but I knew she only spoke like that when in trouble. In the background, Emma, Harper's ill-natured daughter, yelled, "Olivia! Hurry up and prepare the meal!" I couldn't help but laugh, realizing she was just echoing Harper's true feelings. The in-laws' house seemed to be in such a frenzy that I just hung up the phone. Since I had set my phone to reject calls, I didn't know what happened afterward until Lucas returned home. Seeing Lucas's reaction upon his return, I was prepared for the possibility of divorce. Worst case scenario, I was ready to make a life for Thomas and myself as an office worker. When Lucas returned from his parents' house, he apologized profoundly. "I now understand how hard it's been for you all this time. I'm truly sorry." Lucas had been burdened with preparing the Christmas meal, doing everyone's laundry, and taking care of the kids, especially Natalie's child, throughout the holiday. Natalie, after hearing from me about the affair, had tracked Mason down to our hotel, apparently catching him in the act. Indeed, when we were leaving, the hotel staff seemed flustered, and there was talk of a quarreling couple. Perhaps that was her. Everyone had complained about Lucas's cooking, having never done it before, and, fed up with their nasty remarks. "I'm cutting ties with this house too. I'm never coming back," he snapped. It seems Lucas has declared cutting ties as well. Hearing Lucas's declaration of disconnection, I felt relieved and confessed, "If you hadn't decided to cut ties with your family, I was planning to divorce you." Smiling as I said this, Lucas began to cry and apologized again. "I'm really sorry." Believing in his tears, I decided to keep striving together as a couple. From that year on, we decided to go on trips with my parents for Christmas. Both my parents and our family are delighted, and we intend to keep this tradition. Meanwhile, the in-laws' house doesn't seem to gather anyone anymore. Natalie and her husband divorced soon after. Natalie, having custody of the child, now had to work to support her life, leaving her with no long vacations or Christmases. Harper also realized that if the other siblings didn't return, she would have to prepare the meals herself, and didn't want to go through that hassle just to visit her parents' house. Left alone, the in-laws led a lonely life, unable to see their children or grandchildren. Ava, unable to harass anyone else, seemed to have turned her frustrations on Jackson, and I heard from Lucas that Jackson had left home. Lucas, deeply affected by the criticism of his cooking at the in-laws, has been cooking more often lately. Watching Lucas improve his cooking skills makes all that commotion feel like a distant memory.
"Hey Barbara, can't you reconsider? Daniel is still in middle school. To leave him and move abroad."
Barbara, the wife of her son, tilted her head slightly and frowned as if troubled.
"Daniel is plain and slow, and to be honest, it feels like he's not even our child. He seems to get along with you in an odd way, so please take good care of him."
It's one thing to speak ill of oneself, but to say such words about her own son, Daniel, it made her tremble with anger. However, those feelings were suppressed, never turning into words, remaining in her heart. Daniel and I watched the car carrying the departing son and his family until it was out of sight, then looked up at the orange tree in the empty garden. As I wondered, Daniel pointed out that there were still a few left. My son Charles and his family had taken many oranges for memories, but a few remained on the branches. From a distance, it was hard to see clearly, but some of the fruit seemed to be slightly damaged.
Does that mean they didn't want those oranges?
As it got colder with a slight breeze, I suggested to Daniel that we go inside, but he shook his head slightly and turned to me, his face overflowing with tears.
"Dad and Mom don't want me because I'm slow. It's okay. You don't need to worry."
I was furious. I closed my eyes, pondering what to do with this anger, and then pondered some more, firmly resolving to affirm and raise this child positively. My name is Susan. Lately, I've lost my appetite and have been feeling unwell. When I consulted a doctor about my unclear health issues, I was advised to get more nutrition. Even with the vague advice to get more nutrition, I wondered what exactly I should eat, considering going to a steakhouse every day. But that would never be sustainable with any amount of living expenses, so I decided to make balanced meals every day. No, that would be too much hassle to keep up. So, I decided to make it a point to eat the oranges planted in my garden. Honestly, I never really cared for the oranges planted in the yard before. I hadn't paid much attention to them every year. Usually, I left the fruit for the birds to eat or just cleaned up whatever fell to the ground. But this year, after seeing a TV infomercial about easy-to-use pruning shears, I was full of motivation and bought them. Just when I was determined to start picking the oranges, I ended up hurting my back. It was supposed to be easy according to the sales pitch, but apparently not for someone with a bad back. If there's a house in a quiet residential area known for its large orange tree, that would be ours. Our orange tree has years when it bears lots of fruit and years when it doesn't, and this year, the branches are laden with oranges. It's just the year I was determined to eat a lot of them. But what to do with my injured back? Just when I was thinking that, my son and his family came to visit at the perfect time. When I explained the situation to my son, he immediately said, "All right, I'll pick them." And he rushed out to the garden. My son and my grandson, Christopher, were using a long-handled pruning shear to joyfully pick oranges from the branches.
Wow, Christopher! You got a big one!
My son skillfully cut the oranges from the branches and had his son pick them up. As for me, I was sitting by the window overlooking the orange tree, staring at a chessboard with my other grandson, Daniel. Daniel was looking intently at the chess pieces laid out on the board, lost in thought, seemingly oblivious to the noise of Charles and Christopher gathering oranges in the garden. It seems I was so focused that I didn't even hear Charles and Christopher making noise while gathering oranges in the garden. When Christopher, the older brother, quietly placed an orange beside Daniel and then turned to me, he put his index finger to his lips in a gesture for silence. He didn't want to disturb his brother, who was deeply engrossed in the game. That was the kind of kindness Christopher had.
"Charles, lunch is ready."
"Yeah, thanks. We'll be right there." Perhaps one reason my son and his wife visit my house several times a month is because my husband had passed away early. My son's wife, Barbara, is a down-to-earth woman who naturally takes over the kitchen in our house to prepare lunches for everyone. Daniel and I were invited to join them for the meal, but Daniel remained silent, staring at the chessboard, unwilling to move. When I gently touched Daniel's shoulder,
"Huh?"
he looked up in surprise, saying,
"Grandma, will you play chess with me after lunch?"
"Of course. Let's go." Barbara, Charles, and Christopher were enjoying their meal while watching TV, laughing together. The TV featured a special on a high school soccer player belonging to a famous high school, and Charles pointed at the TV, tapping Christopher on the shoulder. "Hey, look, Christopher. The high school you're going to is on TV." Christopher has always been athletically gifted, shining in every game he plays. Daniel took up soccer as well, but wasn't quite as skilled. He couldn't outshine his brother. Barbara looked at Christopher with joy and said,
"I heard from a friend that Christopher is quite famous among middle schoolers. He's really good at soccer. It seems his name has even spread to other schools."
She looked even happier than Christopher, the subject of the conversation. I couldn't help but clear my throat and glance at Daniel's expression. He looked somewhat lonely, slowly slurping up his pasta one strand at a time.
Now that Christopher has a scholarship for soccer in high school, it's Daniel's turn. With a promising brother like Christopher, Daniel will surely improve quickly too.
Right. Christopher and Daniel, let's play soccer in the park after lunch. But Charles, isn't Daniel going to continue with chess? Oh, right. You haven't finished yet? I informed Charles that the game was still ongoing. Then, I suggested if they'd like to join us in chess, though playing soccer is also great. Charles and Barbara exchanged glances and started laughing together. You're joking, right? Playing chess by the window on such a sunny day? What an unhealthy hobby. Charles, that's a bit harsh on Susan's only hobby. Both of them seemed to mock me and Daniel, but I didn't want to argue and risk spoiling our family relationship, so I nodded along and started washing up in the kitchen. I peeled the freshly picked oranges, placed them on a plate, and brought them out. Christopher and Daniel started eating them, laughing together. I discreetly approached Charles and tapped him lightly on the head from behind. Hey, you know Daniel isn't much into sports like soccer, right? He enjoys playing chess, so don't say weird things. Did I say something wrong? Charles, seeming neither concerned nor remorseful, took the ball and went to the nearby park with Christopher and Barbara. Left behind, Daniel and I returned to our seats by the window. Sitting in front of the sunlit chessboard, Daniel casually looked up at the orange tree. There are still a lot of oranges left, huh? Yes, do you want some more? Daniel shook his head slightly and then turned his gaze back to the chessboard, refocusing his attention. He has a strong ability to concentrate. At this point, I can't predict how Daniel will grow up, but I have a feeling he'll take a path quite different from his brother Christopher's. And so years passed since then. On a sunny day, Daniel and I were again eating oranges picked from the garden. After Charles finished bringing in few small boxes to my house, he stood by the window with a gentle smile, looking up at the orange tree. Sorry, Mom, please take good care of Daniel. I pondered over how to respond. While caressing the oranges picked from the garden, I sighed. Christopher, having been recognized for his soccer talent at his new high school, was scouted by an overseas club team. I, knowing little about soccer, couldn't grasp the significance of the team that scouted my grandson. But when I heard Charles was ready to quit his job and move abroad, I realized this was a big deal. With assistance promised by the scouting team for their life abroad, Barbara was already excited about the overseas move. Every time we met, she would say, "I'm really interested in foreign cultures." She was already studying the culture of the country through books. I had assumed the whole family would move abroad, but they asked me to raise Daniel alone in my house. Christopher was initially surprised and was opposed to the idea. Think about it, Christopher. Wouldn't Daniel be happier living here with Grandma than in an unfamiliar environment? Don't you think so? But Barbara convinced him by saying so. And today, after moving all of Daniel's belongings into my house, they were set to leave on an afternoon flight. Daniel looked sad as he checked the contents of a cardboard box filled with his clothes. Charles and Christopher, knowing they wouldn't return to this house for a while, picked many oranges from the garden tree as a final memory. As the tree's branches became bare with each orange picked, it started to look naked. Daniel, Grandma might not feel well sometimes, so help her out, okay? And work hard on your studies too. Charles said this to Daniel as he cheerfully bid farewell. Though I knew it was already decided, I couldn't help but pull Barbara aside to a spot away from Christopher and Daniel and started speaking in a low voice. Hey Barbara, can't you reconsider? Daniel is still attending middle school. To leave him and move abroad. Barbara tilted her head slightly and frowned as if troubled. Daniel is plain and slow, and to be honest, it feels like he's not even our child. Since he seems to get along with you in a strange way, please take good care of him. It's one thing to speak ill of oneself, but to say such words about your own son, Daniel, made me tremble with anger. However, those feelings remained pressed deep into my heart, never turning into words. Daniel and I watched the car carrying my departing son and his family until it disappeared from view, then turned to look up at the orange tree in the empty garden. As I wondered about the tree, Daniel spoke and pointed out, "There are a few left." Charles and the others had taken many oranges as memories, but a few remained on the branches. From a distance, it was unclear, but some appeared slightly damaged. Does that mean they didn't want those oranges? As the breeze grew colder, I suggested to Daniel that we go inside. He shook his head slightly and turned to me, his face overflowing with tears. Dad and Mom don't want me because I'm slow. It's okay. There's nothing to worry about. I was furious. I closed my eyes, pondering what to do with this anger, then resolved to affirm and nurture this child positively. 9 years have passed since then. Beside the chessboard by the window, I looked up at the orange tree in the garden. The birds know best when the oranges are ripe, pecking at the fruit when it's time. I used this as a cue to start harvesting. Stepping out from the window to the garden, I picked a low-hanging fruit. It was free of insect damage and had a nice color. After the doorbell rang, I called out loudly, "It's open!" To my surprise, I was greeted by an unexpected visitor as heavy footsteps approached. "Mom, it's been a while. Where's Daniel? It's really been a long time. What brings you here all of a sudden?" "Well, I saw Daniel's achievements in the newspaper. Isn't it amazing? Finally, he feels like our son." As I sighed heavily and sat back down in front of the chessboard, Barbara asked, "Where's Daniel?" "He's reading a chess magazine in his room. He's a pro now, so try not to disturb him." Since our parting 9 years ago, Daniel and I played chess daily, and he gradually showed his talent, eventually becoming a professional chess player. The journey was tough, but we persevered together. Though he never said it, Daniel might have wanted to prove something to the parents who left him. Recently, Daniel won a major title as a pro chess player, making headlines. I hadn't told Charles or Barbara, but they must have found out and hurried back. Soon, Daniel came out of his room. He had grown taller and more robust over the 9 years, the perfect picture of health. Charles, seeing his son all grown up, said, "It's been a while." Saying this, he put his arm around Daniel's shoulder, and from behind, Barbara also. "You've become so admirable," smiled tenderly, as if completely contented. "Now I'm willing to live with you. Now that you're a respectable adult, it's your turn to help out your dad and mom with their lives." "I'm apparently not your child, so I have no obligation to help." The conversation sounded almost like a comedy, making me burst out laughing. Charles, tapping Daniel on the shoulder, looked puzzled. It seemed like the words were completely unexpected. The audacity to offer to live together after 9 years was astonishing. "What's wrong? Are you being stubborn after this long reunion? You must have been lonely living with Grandma all this time." "Don't worry, we'll live together from now on." "What are you talking about? Live together? I'm not a child anymore, why should I live with you?" Barbara, pulling Charles away from the frozen embrace, said, "What are you saying? We haven't been able to contact Christopher for years, and our life is in shambles. We've been living off Christopher's soccer income, and now we have no savings." "What does that have to do with me?" "After all the effort we put into supporting Christopher's soccer, he suddenly disappeared. We didn't know what to do. It's impossible for us to start working now, and you're the only one we can rely on." "If you're looking for Christopher, he's here in this house." "Hey, Christopher." At Daniel's casual call, Christopher appeared from the kitchen, wearing a cute cat apron, holding an orange, and skillfully peeling it with a knife. "What's up?" Christopher, with an innocent expression, surprised Charles and Barbara by being there. "Christopher, why are you here?" Seems like there's a lot we need to talk about, so just sit down and wait. I'll cut some oranges for us. As Christopher served the oranges on a plate to Charles and Barbara, I prepared coffee for everyone. Christopher began to share that, although he was initially enthusiastic about his soccer career and contract with an overseas club, his experiences abroad gradually sparked an interest in becoming an interpreter. Upon hearing Christopher's dream, Charles,
Being an interpreter won't earn you as much as a professional soccer player. That's not acceptable.
dismissed it without even listening. Disappointed by his parents, who seemed only to care about the money he could bring in rather than his dreams, Christopher lost interest in soccer. He secretly contacted Daniel and me and returned to our town. Now, he's working at a language school while studying to become an interpreter. After explaining this, Christopher sat up straight and faced Charles and Barbara directly.
I'm truly grateful that you took me abroad for soccer. But I've found a dream I want to pursue more than soccer. If you're going to deny that, I'd rather you not be involved in my life.
Not be involved?
Do you know how much we sacrificed to support your soccer career abroad?
He reflected on how much time he had sacrificed as a father to support Christopher's soccer. He passionately explained how much he and Barbara, Christopher's mother, had hoped and expected to make Christopher a top soccer player.
Christopher, your dad quit his job to support your soccer. And now, you're giving that up for a job as an interpreter? It's not too late to go back to the club team.
Right, that's a good idea.
If life gets tough until you succeed in soccer, Daniel can support us.
He's a famous chess player now, after all. The conversation seemed somewhat detached from reality. Perhaps even Charles and Barbara realized the absurdity of their words. Despite understanding the unfairness of their situation, fear of not being able to survive without such plans seemed to drive their irrational statements. The reason no one spoke up wasn't because the discussion had concluded, but rather because the end point of the conversation had become unclear. I poured coffee into each of the empty cups. The scent of coffee filled the living room, which was enveloped in silence. Daniel quietly shifted his gaze to the chessboard by the window. After Dad and Mom left for abroad, I played chess almost every day.
Left for abroad? That makes us sound like the bad guys. Do you think you would have been happy if you had come with us?
You're right.
If I had lived with parents like you, I might have lost sight of what I was striving for, just like Christopher did.
This provocative stance immediately angered Barbara. She stood up and lunged at Daniel, prompting me to quickly step in front of him to block her. Barbara glared at me and shouted at Daniel.
Move! How dare you speak to your parents like that?
Speak to your parents?
It's been 9 years. 9 years! You didn't come back to see Daniel even once in all that time. Can you imagine how long these years have been for him? We are their parents, you know? Can you believe that children wouldn't help their parents? Christopher and Daniel are saying they're abandoning us when we're in trouble.
Charles, not wanting to be outdone by Barbara's intensity, stood up to face me as well.
Exactly. It's irresponsible not to help when your parents are in trouble. It's a child's duty.
You're talking about duty?
I mentioned I was feeling a bit unwell 9 years ago, remember? Yet, you chose to ignore that and went abroad. It's shameful to change your tune when it suits you. But that's because...
Charles mumbled awkwardly, his gaze darting around, not sure what to do. Christopher approached Daniel with a calm voice and apologized.
I'm really sorry for everything. Dad, we've decided we want to cut ties with you and Mom. Can you just leave us alone from now on?
Don't joke around. What do you take your parents for? Use us when convenient and discard us when done? You're going to abandon us irresponsibly while we're struggling with our lives? Involuntarily, I found myself shouting.
That's not it.
My voice might have echoed throughout the quiet neighborhood, possibly heard by the neighbors. But I couldn't worry about the neighbors at such a moment. I grasped Christopher and Daniel's hands firmly in mine. Holding them by my sides, I could feel them trembling slightly. Despite their calm demeanor, they were frightened by their biological parents' sudden visit. I knew I had to express the anger on their behalf. It was time to voice the feelings Christopher and Daniel had harbored towards their parents. It's the adults' job to work for their children, not the other way around.
We're the parents. We are a family.
After abandoning a young Daniel and selfishly deciding on Christopher's potential, like you have any rights to say that. How are you their family? At my words, Charles's eyes widened in shock, and he reached out to grab my collar. Instinctively, I braced for any potential violence by curling up defensively. However, Daniel quickly stepped in front of me and effortlessly lifted Charles, sending him spinning through the air. And before you know it, Charles was lying on the ground, looking up at Daniel. In a state of shock and lying down, Charles is too astonished to say anything. He probably never imagined that the once frail Daniel could throw him.
I won't allow anyone to harm our family.
Being completely thrown can make a person feel utterly defeated. Charles, lying on the ground and looked down upon by Daniel, must have felt a deep sense of embarrassment. Barbara rushed to Charles with a worried look, but he got up, saying, "I'm fine." However, the aggression he had shown earlier had vanished. Voices from outside could be heard. It seemed the neighbors had gathered, alerted by the shouting from our house. Charles and Barbara exchanged glances and hurriedly left the house, their departure marked by their pitiful retreat. Their future, after such a humiliating exit, remained unknown. Relying on Christopher's income from soccer, Charles and Barbara had little in the way of qualifications or work experience, making it difficult for them to find decent employment at their age. 2 years later, Christopher successfully became an interpreter. His work took him to various places, keeping him busy. Daniel continued to diligently study and practice chess, striving to master the game. Both brothers excelled in their respective fields. As for me, with my grandchildren grown and independent, I started teaching at a children's chess club, aiming to nurture their interests. Having loved chess since childhood, I had once dreamed of becoming a professional player. Despite joining chess clubs in middle and high school and competing in numerous matches, I recognized my limitations and eventually lost faith in my own talent. Even though friends and family encouraged me, saying I had talent and should keep at it, I lost the ability to believe in myself. Having experienced the pain of not accepting my own immaturity, regretting giving up on my dreams, and feeling a tightness in my chest, I had a strong desire to convey something important to the children in my chess class. After all, I had successfully raised Daniel, an exceptional professional player. Although it's often challenging, I find fulfillment in guiding each child, focusing on their individual hearts and potential. Christopher and Daniel live harmoniously with me, sharing these values. I deeply respect Christopher and Daniel, each thriving and fulfilling their dreams. One day, after a long while, Christopher and Daniel offered to pick oranges in our garden. As I've gotten older, reaching for the high oranges has become more of a chore, so I was grateful for the help. Christopher stretched the pruning shears as high as he could, trying to gather all the oranges for my chess club students.
This is quite the tedious task,
I remarked with a smile, solving chess problems by the window. I remembered how I used to challenge Daniel with my own chess problems, but now, as a professional player, he would present me with puzzles and watch amused as I pondered over them.
This one's tough.
It's a joyful realization that Daniel, whom I taught chess, has far surpassed me in skill. Hearing laughter, I saw Christopher and Daniel gathering oranges with joy.
Grandma?
What's up? There's something I've always wondered about every year. Daniel pointed to an orange located at the very top of the tree. That branch is always out of reach with the pruning shears, so picking from it is forbidden. Shouldn't we pick all of them for your chess students? I stopped Christopher from fetching a ladder from the shed.
Leaving a few oranges on the tree keeps it from looking completely bare.
I chuckled.
Leave that one. It's meant to be left there. I used to look at the remaining oranges after Dad and Mom left us and wonder if I was like those unwanted fruits.
Daniel's face showed a hint of sadness. I remained silent, focusing on the chess problem.
Not just for oranges, but there's an old custom of leaving one fruit on the tree instead of picking them all.
Daniel came over to me and watched as I pondered over a chess problem he had created. His expression bore the same youthful look as it did back then.
There's an old custom of leaving one fruit on the tree as a token of gratitude and hope for future harvests.
Gratitude and hope.
Moreover, it's left as food for the birds to help them through the harsh winter. The last remaining orange isn't unwanted, it's actually the most special one.
Special.
I see, so that's how it was.
Daniel whispered softly, and I gently stroked his head. Daniel, who has grown quite a bit, doesn't try to escape from my hands and allows me to continue stroking him without resistance. Well, what to do now? This chess problem presented by such a dear grandchild. It's too difficult for me to understand at all. Maintaining my dignity as a respected chess figure in his eyes was crucial, yet finding the solution seemed impossible in the moment. As I pondered, stroking Daniel's head, I hoped for a way out of this predicament, wishing for more such special moments to continue indefinitely.
I will make you happy for the rest of your life. Will you marry me?
Of course I will. It was 5 years ago when my husband Trent proposed to me. We were college classmates, joined in the same student club, and felt a great compatibility with each other. Naturally, we started dating and then got married. My name is Yolanda. 5 years have passed since our marriage, and I am now 33 years old. I'm still living the married life with Trent, but you've been slacking off lately, haven't you?
What? What are you talking about all of a sudden? What is this I found?
Trent, who had just changed clothes in the closet after coming back home, confronted me with a receipt he found in the trash can of the room. It was a receipt from the lunch I had outside today.
I don't understand what you mean. Whose money do you think you're spending on these lunches? I'm having trouble here, you going out for these expensive lunches every time, especially when you're not working. Don't live luxuriously on my dime.
The happy atmosphere of our newlywed days had faded over the 5 years. Trent started acting like a bossy husband about a year ago. Suddenly, he completely stopped helping around the house.
It's weird for me to be doing housework. Housework is a woman's job. Especially since you're a housewife, I shouldn't be helping you.
With a mean smirk, Trent started making snide remarks. Although I was puzzled at first, I got used to his attitude within half a year. However, he wouldn't give me any answers when I asked why he changed. Yet without any clear reason, Trent just kept on bossing around every day.
But look at the cost of that lunch, it's pretty cheap, right? It's not even $15 per person. I don't think it's expensive enough to be angry about, and it's not like I go every day. Is it bad even once a month?
What? Just because it's infrequent, you think that makes it okay? Are you kidding me? Whose money do you think this is?
But...
It's not your money. It's my money. So if I say it's a waste, then it's a waste. If you're upset about it, do something about it yourself.
Don't be unreasonable. Besides, you were the one who said I shouldn't work,
isn't that a bit much to say? I kept working even after we got married. But in the second year of our marriage, Trent got transferred to a different department and started working long hours. That's when he asked me to quit my job. He said he wanted me to be at home when he was tired and coming home from work. And so, to fulfill that wish, I quit the job I loved. Women working outside the home never leads to anything good. Quit it, quit it. And if you did work, could you manage household chores too? Impossible, right? It's clear you wouldn't be able to handle it all perfectly. But I don't think it's right to complain like that. However, I had already reached my limit with Trent's attitude. I wondered why he needed to say that far, without any clear reason or cause. And no answers even when I asked him directly. I was thinking that if this continued for life, maintaining our marriage would be difficult.
With that way of speaking and your ridiculous attitude, it's really unbelievable. If that's the case, I won't do the housework and will go out instead. I'll take care of my own chores, but you'll have to do your own, Trent.
What? Why the hell?
Isn't it obvious? There's no way I'll do this being blamed like that. I don't know where you got these ideas, but the days of housework is women's work have already gone. If you're going to keep complaining, then I have my own plans.
I began to calmly clear up the dishes in the sink. Usually, when I speak up like this, Trent loses his words and starts mumbling, "No, I didn't mean, But even paying attention to that is tiresome. Ending a marriage isn't something that can be done easily. That's why a part of me still wants to believe that one day things will change. Tossed around by this difficult issue, I kept wondering whether I should cut ties with Trent. Then one day, out of the blue, Trent sent me a message. "Starting next month, I'll take charge of your wallet." I had no idea what he was talking about, but that night, when Trent came home, he started to explain.
"Clearly, I can't entrust you with our finances. Starting next month, I'll be managing the money."
What? Why all of a sudden? Did something happen?
Let's be honest, you've been really extravagant, haven't you? To be frank, I have no idea about the amount you're spending. So, I'll take control of the finances. That way, we won't waste unnecessary money, right?
I was bewildered, wondering what he was suddenly talking about. I thought maybe the issue with the lunch before was really bothering him.
Look, about that lunch the other day? I've said it many times, but I don't go that often, you know? I can't trust you.
What?
So, what would make you satisfied? I'll be satisfied if I manage it for the time being.
Huh?
So, you just want to manage it yourself and you're making up excuses?
No.
That's not it. I just want to keep track of it.
Got any complaints?
It's strange. Why should you manage the money I earn by working? I should be the one managing it.
Whenever Trent lies or makes a desperate excuse, he always shows a look of annoyance. And right now, he's making those excuses right in front of me. There must be some other reason.
Hey, are you hiding something?
What?
I'm not hiding anything. Well, even if you say it's not good, starting next month I'll be the one managing. Got it? This is a done deal. It's fine to say that, but can you manage it? Trent, you're not exactly frugal. Are you mocking me? I can manage my own salary. Well, your spending money will be just $100 though.
Trent, looking very pleased with himself, decides on the amount of money I can freely use and laughs heartily. In the first place, how does he expect me to manage with just $100? He clearly has no understanding of our household finances. And what about the living expenses? At this point, I felt it was best to keep my cool.
Oh, so you got $300 and you're calling me stingy? Don't compare me to you. I'm the one who earned that money, so it's only natural. Besides, you can hardly do anything with just $300. It was inconvenient for me. Don't say you decided to take control just for that reason. That's none of your business. You've been leeching off me all this time. Now,
It's time to pay for being such a parasitic woman. Parasitic, huh? I never thought I'd be called bad like this. I don't care. Listen, I'm managing the finances from next month. It's decided. Don't complain every time, got it? Trent fled to the bathroom and took a shower. I was far from convinced, because I felt that Trent was hiding something more. The next day, I tried to uncover the truth. But of course, there was no obvious evidence lying around the house. It's strange. I felt like he was hinting he needed money, but Suddenly, I remembered our savings account. Actually, we had set up this account after getting married. It was intended for emergency expenses. I noticed that the drawer containing the banking card had been slightly opened. I haven't opened it recently, surely not. Tentatively, I checked the bank balance online. And there it was, the balance was only $7. What? What is this? I was speechless to see that, which should have been well over several $1,000,000, was almost nothing. That night, I confronted Trent, but the answer I got was unexpected. What's wrong with me using it? I earned the money. If you don't like it, we can get a divorce, you know? What do you mean? This was the account we were saving for emergencies. I can't believe you used it without asking. What did you spend it on? Trent was unapologetic. Moreover, he boldly claimed it was his money. However, the withdrawn amount was about $6 million. Obviously something was wrong. I was thinking of divorce if he evaded the reasons, but it ended up with him implying divorce first. However, Trent, with a composed attitude, blurted out something outrageous. Well, it was for my girlfriend. What? I spent it on my girlfriend. Got a problem? Trent casually admitted to having an affair. With a creepy smile on his face. I was beyond angry and managed to deal with the situation calmly. She's younger and cuter than you. So I don't mind getting a divorce at all. Oh, really? Well, since you're so openly talking about your affair in front of me, you must be prepared, right? Then Trent burst out laughing. Ahahaha. Hilarious. You know, in this world, evidence is everything. Proof? Preparedness? Do you even have that? Sure, I just admitted to having a girlfriend, but do you have any proof of that? Trent revealed his infidelity, confident that I had no proof. Essentially, without evidence, I couldn't prove his adultery. This meant that no matter what was said, he could deny everything in a crunch since there was no proof. In the world, you often hear about housewives realizing their husband's infidelity, then getting compensation in divorce court. But reality isn't so sweet. You won't be able to do anything to me and will be divorced. What's that supposed to mean? See? You're starting to understand your position, right? You don't want to be divorced, do you? So just shut up and follow what I say. The reason doesn't matter. Trent smirked triumphantly at me. I despised Trent from the bottom of my heart, but I knew I had to handle this calmly. Okay, so I'll be managing the finances from next month. Oh, and I have plans to go on a trip with my friends next weekend. I won't tell you where to avoid being caught. Anyway, it'll be interesting to see what you can do with just $100 a month. Trent then went into the bedroom. After a while, I could hear him talking to someone in the room. It must have been his mistress. On that day, I realized I was betrayed by my husband and my life was being controlled. Or so it seemed. A month later, Trent returned from his trip with his friends, rolling his suitcase. I'm back. Had a blast. Don't expect any souvenirs from me, obviously. Hey, what's this? Trent probably wanted to flaunt his dominance as he entered the house, with his snide remarks echoing down the hallway. But without paying attention to his voice, I was sitting on the living room sofa, legs crossed. And there, spread out on the floor around me, were all the pieces of evidence of Trent's infidelity, waiting for his return. Photos, investigation reports, WhatsApp conversations, and more. I had laid out all the evidence I had meticulously collected.
Hey, what's this? I thought I'd show you my face one last time before leaving. How about it? This is all the evidence I've been gathering for so long.
I smiled at Trent, who turned pale. He seemed frightened by my gaze. All his earlier bravado had vanished.
Proof? What? How did you? You thought you could boldly cheat because there was no proof, but you were so wrong. I've been collecting this evidence for a year, waiting for this day. A year ago,
I had accidentally seen a ridiculous message of "I love you" on your mobile phone a year ago, which tipped me off about the affair. Since then, I had been discreetly gathering evidence, entrusting it to professionals.
Wait. How did you collect all this evidence? You'd need money to hire a professional. You didn't use my money, did you? I think it's questionable that you keep referring to it as your money, but right after I discovered your affair, I started a data entry job to have my own disposable income. What? I did all this to save up for investigation costs and gather evidence. But the side job ended up being more successful than I thought. Within half a year, I was making as much as an average salaried worker. That's why I could afford to go out for lunch without worry and even hire a professional. Are you serious? I plan to keep doing it. So let's get a divorce. I don't need you anymore.
I stood up from the sofa and was about to leave the room, when Trent grabbed my arm.
Wait. I don't want a divorce.
What? I quickly shook off his grip and glared at him.
Who said it was okay to divorce? Since I have your permission, I'll proceed with the discussion, all right? Wait. I wasn't serious. I just wanted to scare you a bit.
So? I sighed deeply. Just thinking that I married this man made me feel disgusted.
Sorry. I'm really sorry. Please forgive me.
No. I didn't want to hear any more excuses, or see his face or hear his voice. So I just added a single word and left the house. Of course, I had copies of all the evidence scattered on the floor. I had the originals and all the photos. So I deliberately left them scattered as a final parting gift.
Don't go, please. I'm begging you.
I ignored his familiar voice behind me, closed the front door, and went back to my parents' house. 3 days later. Trent, his mistress Yvonne, me and my lawyer arranged to meet. The topics were only compensation in the divorce case and repayment of the squandered savings. I demanded $3 million from Trent and $1.5 million from Yvonne.
Don't joke with me. I will absolutely not pay $1.5 million.
Yvonne came at me, yelling loudly. Trent tried desperately to stop her, but I was not idle enough to deal with these foolish people. Or rather, Trent had no taste in women. A junior from the same company, just because she's fairly good-looking, he got involved with such a woman.
All right, if that's the case, we won't settle out of court. Let's go to trial then. What? A trial? Why?
I became weary of even explaining inside, ready to leave the place. Why do I have to confront such idiocy? And then, I just let out what I was thinking, both in my expression and attitude. Ugh. Ridiculous.
You knew he was married when you got involved with him, right? Don't you realize that's wrong?
How old are you?
You're wrecking someone's family. You should be grateful we're even considering a financial settlement. It'd be wise for you to recognize that you're getting off easy. Use whatever brains you have left. What? I can't stand to hear your excuses. Okay, so no settlement outside of court. I really don't want this to drag out, but it seems I have no choice. We'll settle this in court then. And of course, we'll have to inform your company about the lawsuit caused by your affair, right? Make sure you tell them. Goodbye, you won't get another chance. Wait a moment. Yolanda. Sorry. I'm so sorry. Please don't go to court.
I let out everything I wanted to say all at once. And then, I resolved to take it to court. Not agreeing to an out-of-court settlement and going to trial is common sense in society. The other party is senseless, but maybe they'll understand how terrible their actions were if they suffer the consequences. I thought they deserved to go through that pain. Afterward, Trent tried to contact me numerous times, but I ignored all of it. I shut out all communication and consulted with my lawyer about the divorce trial. The trial began, and both sides had lawyers, but then they sought a settlement. However, I refused it. I already gave you a chance, I said. And then, I won the case. Even though the compensation was reduced, I was really glad to settle everything decisively in court. Following the trial, both of them took voluntary retirement from the company. They felt uncomfortable being whispered the foolish who refused settlement and lost the case. Now, they have returned to their parents' homes, but things didn't work out, and it seems they were driven out of their hometowns. Nobody knows where they are or what they're doing now. And since they haven't tried to contact me, I've been living peacefully. To be safe, I'm considering the idea of moving abroad, for I'm a bit scared of time. I'm thinking it would be nice to live leisurely in a country where the cost of living is fairly reasonable.
Please, help me!
The voice of Mia on the phone was so frantic that I had never heard. She was supposed to be on a plane to Hawaii with Ethan by now. Was there some kind of trouble? I braced myself.
Our house! Our house!
What? Our house? Mia wasn't on the plane. Learning the truth, I resolved to send Ethan, who had been missing, to hell. I'm Lily, a 32-year-old corporate employee at a major trading company. My husband Ethan is a year younger than me, and we got married 3 years ago. He works for a big corporation too, and is quite handsome by any standard. I didn't choose him for his looks or salary, but he's been nothing short of perfect as a spouse. I've been happy we married early. Our marriage was smooth sailing, but then, out of nowhere, Ethan quit his job recently. According to him, he couldn't give up his dream of becoming a writer and needed to submit lots of manuscripts for competitions to debut. I told him, "You can write after work on weekdays or on weekends." But my words fell on deaf ears. Instead of focusing on his health after quitting, he's been mostly sleeping at home, almost like he's unemployed. Hey, if you're going to be at home, at least do some housework.
If I do the housework, I'll have no time to write my manuscript.
You're just sleeping all day anyway. I was fed up with this repetitive argument. Not working, not doing house chores, just sleeping. My patience with Ethan was wearing thin, and I started considering divorce. But thinking about my good income, Ethan's remaining savings, and most of all, Mia, Ethan's mother, who was overjoyed about our marriage, made it hard to take that step. Mia raised Ethan alone and dotes on him as he has no siblings. She was thrilled about our marriage, treating me like her own daughter. However, since Ethan quit his job, Mia started to act awkwardly around me. She often didn't respond to my messages. It was clear she was avoiding me, and I couldn't figure out why. When I asked Ethan, he just said it would be best to leave her alone, not taking it seriously. Gradually, I too started to dread contacting her, deciding to just observe as he suggested.
At least do the house chores if you're not working. I'm doing all the work and house chores, while you just sleep all day.
That day, my anger finally erupted. Ethan was talking about a deadline for some competition, but he wasn't acting like it. He complained about me being slow to prepare lunch while I was working remotely. I couldn't stay silent after that. It turned into a fierce argument.
You're always working too, never make a decent meal. What, should I just not eat? Your lazy behavior without working is only possible because I'm out there earning our living expenses, right? Your savings hardly make a dent in our costs.
Being called out for not working and being supported by me, Ethan's face turned red with embarrassment and he started shaking. I thought if he got violent, I'd leave the house right away, but thankfully, that worst-case scenario was avoided. Without saying a word, Ethan stormed out of the house. Watching him leave in his casual clothes, with just his mobile phone and wallet, making deliberately loud footsteps, I felt like I was looking at a petulant child. The only place he could go in that getup would be his parents' house. I thought of warning Mia in advance about Ethan possibly causing trouble, but, as usual, she didn't answer her phone. He sneaked back home later that night, but from that day on, our conversations dwindled, and he started avoiding me, going out more frequently. For an unemployed Ethan, his destinations were limited, usually his parents' house, and sometimes I'd find receipts from internet cafes. I tried to initiate conversations several times, but each time, he would escape to his room or just leave the house. I gave up on repairing our relationship and started preparing for a divorce. I thought it best to inform Mia about the divorce. I sent texts and made calls, but got no response. Even when I asked Ethan that something might have happened to her, he just said she was fine. Considering how often he visited his parents' house, I believed him, but I started doubting his whereabouts. I could just ask Mia how often he visits her, but I couldn't get in touch with her. I thought about investigating his whereabouts myself, but with work and household chores, I didn't have the time or energy. Returning home after a late-night overtime shift, I found him fiddling with something in front of the closet.
What are you doing up so late?
Welcome back. Actually, I'm planning to take Mom to Hawaii tomorrow, just packing for the trip.
Tomorrow? That's quite sudden.
Unconcerned by my surprise, he happily packed the luggage. I knew Mia always wanted to go on a trip. After Ethan's father passed away when Ethan was young, Mia devoted herself to working and raising him alone. She rarely even went to the department store, let alone on trips. I remember her saying that with a wistful smile.
This month, Mom turns 60, so I thought I'd fulfill her long-standing dream. Mia's turning 60 already. Yeah, that's why I've been working part-time lately, saving up money for this. But there's a bit of a problem.
He looked up at me.
I've got enough for Mom's part of the trip, but I'm short for my half. I've been saving, but it's not enough. So, I was wondering, Lily, could you help out a bit? Is that okay?
He looked at me with a pleading expression, radiating charm as if refusing him would be unthinkable.
So, you're saying I should pay for your part?
Startled by my unexpectedly cold tone, he hastily shook his head.
No. Just lend me the money. I'll pay it back after the trip.
And you're not going to fail to pay me back because you can't find a job, right? I glared at him, and he looked suspiciously guilty. I was astounded by his audacity.
I won't do that. Trust me, I can even write a commitment form if you want.
All right, let's do that. I pulled a piece of paper and a pen towards me.
After the trip, you'll get a full-time job and start paying it back. No part-time jobs, understood?
He grudgingly agreed, though he seemed reluctant.
And if you can't pay back, we'll divorce. We'll settle it in court with a third party.
Divorce? He looked visibly unsettled. Maybe the reality of divorce hit him hard. Still, when I insisted I wouldn't lend him the money unless he agreed to these terms, he reluctantly accepted. I wrote down the conditions and the amount, and had Ethan sign it. Make sure you pay it back.
I know.
I made a copy of the agreement and handed it to Ethan. It might be a good idea to show it to Mia if I get a chance. Feeling exhausted, I left him by the closet and went to bed. I intended to see him off, but he must have left early. When I woke up to go to work, he and his luggage were already gone. Thanks to yesterday's overtime, my workload today was light. I could finish my work in the morning and take a half day off. I planned to enjoy life without Ethan to the fullest. After finishing my work in the morning, I was having lunch, wondering if he and Mia were on the plane by now, when my phone started ringing loudly. Thinking it might be a work call, I answered without checking the caller.
Good, you picked up.
It was Mia's voice, desperate and strained, not at all like someone in the middle of a luxurious Hawaiian vacation.
Mia, what's wrong? The trip? Have you already arrived in Hawaii?
Hawaii? Trip?
I don't know what you're talking about. Please, come over. Our house, it's about to burn down.
Mia's plea was almost a scream. In the background, I could hear the sound of fire trucks and orders being shouted. Though I puzzled, I quickly agreed to come and hurriedly finished my lunch and headed to her house. When I arrived, the smell of smoke filled the street, and flames leaped high into the sky.
Mia!
I rushed towards Mia, who seemed on the verge of collapsing in front of her burning house. She looked up at me with a pale, distant face and murmured faintly, "This house is done for." Led by Mia's gaze, I looked up at her house, burning and crumbling before us. It spread from the house next door. The wind was strong, and the fire spread quickly, they said. We didn't even have anything flammable. Numerous fire trucks were on the scene, fighting fiercely against the flames, but her house was engulfed, showing no signs of being saved soon. The wind was strong, occasionally sending sparks flying our way.
It's dangerous here. Why don't we go to my place for now? You won't be able to enter the house even after the fire dies down.
Mia looked at me, hesitating, her face showing a reluctance to be involved with me.
I somehow understand you've been avoiding me, but we can't just stand here forever.
After my words, she finally agreed to move. We hurried towards my home.
By the way, what was that about a Hawaii trip? I thought you were off to Hawaii with Ethan today.
Ethan said that?
Yes. He said it was to celebrate your 60th birthday. I haven't heard a word about it.
We were both confused by our completely mismatched stories. It was a misunderstanding arranged by Ethan.
Ethan told me that you were pushing all the housework onto him and going out with other men. He even said you were trying to borrow money from me, and I should avoid contacting you. That's all lies. When the fire spread to the house, I couldn't reach Ethan by phone. I thought you might know where he is. I never imagined he'd be on a Hawaii trip.
I couldn't fathom why Ethan would lie to keep me and Mia apart. But for Ethan, keeping us disconnected probably served his purposes.
Mia, it's all a misunderstanding. Ethan quit his job to become a writer, but he never writes. He doesn't do housework and just sleeps all day.
Oh, so we've been deceived by him. Perhaps she has been harbored doubts about Ethan. She readily accepted my words. If Ethan hadn't gone to Hawaii with Mia, had he taken the money for two and gone alone? Or maybe with someone else? Anyway, nothing could be done until he returned from his trip. I'll confront him thoroughly when he gets back. That night, Mia and I spent a long time talking, catching up on everything we'd missed. The firefighters had informed us that it was inevitable that the house burned down, so she agreed to stay at my place until she found a new home. The more we talked, the more Ethan's web of lies unraveled. It was unbelievable how he had badmouthed me, even though I was handling both work and all the housework. Mia kept apologizing to me. But it wasn't her fault, it was Ethan's. We waited for Ethan to return.
What's this all about?
For days later, Ethan, oblivious to everything, cheerfully returned home, only to be dragged by Mia and me to the remains of Mia's house. Ethan was speechless in front of the burnt-out house.
Ethan, you lied to Mia and me, and leisurely went on a Hawaii trip while everything burned down. Lies? What are you talking about?
He was visibly shaken and unsettled. Before I could say anything, Mia stepped forward.
Ethan, aren't you ashamed? Lying to Lily to get money. Who did you go on the trip with?
Her anger was fierce, and I involuntarily stepped back. At first, Ethan tried to retort, but the glares from both Mia and me left him speechless.
Wouldn't it be better to just admit it? If we go to court like the commitment form says, you'll lose immediately. I haven't said I won't pay it back yet. You never intended to, right? I know about your real job, Ethan.
He glared at me, trying to hide his panic.
What are you talking about? Rent a boyfriend. Did you enjoy your trip with your client? If your company finds out, you'll be fired for violating the rules.
At my accusation, he gasped. Mia had told me about his secret job the night she stayed at my place. She didn't know what he did, but she mentioned he often came to her house with envelopes bearing a store's logo. Relying on her memories, I found a Rent-A-Boyfriend website. Though his mouth was covered with a heart stamp in the pictures, it was clearly Ethan, and he seemed to be quite popular in sales. I admit I've been working, but the trip was different. As he tried to resist, I showed him the screen of my mobile phone. He looked at the image and stood there, stunned. That dumb woman. It was a disaster that you went on a trip with her. On the screen was a photo of Ethan lying on a Hawaiian beach, smiling next to an unfamiliar woman. The date was from 2 days ago. The woman, mistaking Ethan as her real boyfriend, had probably uploaded the photo to social media. Apparently having no idea about the photo, he hung his head in defeat. With evidence laid bare, there was no escape for him. Ethan, trembling, fell to his knees. Please forgive me. I looked at Ethan's apology with a cold gaze. Mia, too, looked at his disgrace with a chilly stare. Sorry, but I have no intention of forgiving you. I brushed off Ethan as he begged for forgiveness, insisting that he was sorry. I turned to Mia, who continued to glare at Ethan with anger in her eyes. Ethan had been working secretly as a rent-a-boyfriend, and most of his earnings were lost to gambling. I confronted Ethan about his secret purchases of lottery tickets after he promised to work harder, and I decided to file for divorce. We agreed that he would pay back the borrowed travel money with interest. Mia, realizing his earnings as a rent-a-boyfriend, demanded he contribute to the rebuilding of her house. Though the fire had started from the neighboring house, its rapid spread was partly due to Ethan's actions. Apparently, he kept all the things he couldn't bring to our house in his room at Mia's house. This included stylish clothes for his rent-a-boyfriend job, scented candles, and trinkets that women like. His room was so filled that Mia had warned him several times, but he angrily refused to let her in, almost becoming violent. She tried to avoid his room as much as possible. Before leaving for his trip, he had rummaged through his room to get ready, leaving the dusty window open. He forgot to close it, and after the fire started, sparks flew into the room on the wind, quickly engulfing it. If he had closed the window or kept his room tidy, the fire might not have spread so badly. Although the neighboring house was primarily to blame for the fire, Mia, fueled by her anger at being deceived, demanded that he should compensate her at least partially. Ethan, intimidated by Mia and my collection efforts, apparently had been making quite a lot as a rent-a-boyfriend. He bragged about being able to pay off the debt easily, but he was fired from his job and faced a lawsuit for damages. At his rent-a-boyfriend agency, it was forbidden to go on overnight trips with clients. Meeting them without the company's knowledge and posting about dates on social media were also against the rules. He broke all these rules, leading to his dismissal. A client who had chosen him became furious after seeing the social media post from the woman he went to Hawaii with. This led to a loss of regular clients, and the company sued him for damages. Having once earned a high income as a rent-a-boyfriend, he was disillusioned with normal job salaries and struggled to find employment. However, he was eventually forced to use his savings and take part-time jobs to pay off his debts to various parties. Mia decided to live with me until her house was rebuilt. She took over the household chores, freeing me up from my busy work schedule. On weekends, we enjoyed movies together. Once my major project at work is completed, I plan to take a long vacation and fulfill her wish to go on a trip. Although I divorced Ethan, Mia and I found we had a lot in common and would like to maintain our good relationship.